ready in the gallery? Alrighty. Tarzan is not a gorilla, but he knows one, or so we can assume. I haven't seen Tarzan in a while, so don't judge me. The fact of the matter is, when we see that gorillas would win in a fight against a polar bear, we have to say that as the affirmation, the gorilla would completely and totally win, for basically two reasons, which can get pretty extensive. The first is their ability to make sound, and the second is their knowledge, not only of the terrain, but of other animals they encounter. So let's get started with this. Have you ever heard a polar bear roar? Exactly. You haven't. Now, I don't know if you've heard a real gorilla roar, but we all hear them in Tarzan or movies like George of the Jungle. You see the mighty gorilla charging down, whether or not it's fake or real, and it's making a huge sound. And you get terrified, even though you're sitting at home on your couch eating a bucket of popcorn, because what you are thinking is that gorilla, if it were to come out of that screen and fight a polar bear, would win. I mean, it's simple here. They can make sounds, and polar bears can't. Or if they can, nobody knows about it. So when you come into face with a polar bear, you're not going to be scared of the sound it makes because you don't know that it can make one. Now let's go on to the knowledge part of this. A gorilla lives in the jungle, and so not only does it interact with all the animals of the jungle, leopards, birds, toucans, etc., whereas a polar bear only interacts with ice and penguins, and sometimes water. You see, when we look at this, the gorilla knows the expanse of the jungle. They know how to climb trees, go under boulders that are swinging from ropes, perhaps. They even know how to dodge people. But polar bears are so isolated in their land of the Arctic, Antarctica, wherever you want to go, that they don't even know how to avoid people, nor climb trees, nor, avoid a toucan who is flying after them with a beak very large. So essentially, what we have to look at here is that a gorilla would beat a polar bear in a fight because of A, its ability to make an intimidating sound that a polar bear cannot, and B, because of its knowledge, which allows it to win in a fight because not only can it beat other people, it can beat other animals, and knows the expanse of ice or the jungle in a way that would make it beat the polar bear, very, very fairly. So, I affirm gorillas would win against polar bears.
Have you been to SeaWorld? Have you ever seen the polar bear exhibit? Well, first off, the polar bear exhibit is extraordinary. See these really plush, white animals just beasting around, right? Just tromping around like they're all over the place. And what do? They swim. Okay, I'm not sure about the gorilla, but I can hardly see a gorilla with a giant, massive arms trying to paddle through a water. Okay, polar bears, first of all, have the inherent ability to swim, therefore they can actually get within the water that the gorilla cannot. But, have you actually ever noticed the cold-hearted curiosity that a polar bear possesses? Now, what do gorillas eat? Bananas? Fruit? But you know what polar bears do? Gorillas, right? You know what polar bears eat? Seals. They eat penguins. Have you seen how cute a seal is? Have you seen how cute a penguin is? It takes such curiosity, such cold, hard, the absence of any sort of mental ability just to be like, rawr, I'm going to eat you. I don't care how cute you are. So when you really think about it, there's not going to be a second glance at with the curiosity of a polar bear to a gorilla. The polar bear's going to look at the gorilla and be like, hey, you know what? I'm going to come and eat you right now. I'm going to attack you with a pure force. Have you ever seen a grizzly bear attack? The grizzly bear's curiosity is immense. It stands on both legs, and it just roars with this utmost booming, loud noise, and you get scared. The polar bear not only can attack on the two legs, it can also run up with extraordinary speeds. Okay? I'm not sure about a gorilla. I've never seen a gorilla actually run to the, with the intense rage that a polar bear does. But if you really look at it, the intense curiosity and the cold-heartedness that the polar bear possesses is so much more significant than the gorilla that it would clearly win in a fight.
All right. So, do you want the first question, or shall I take it?
Ladies first.
All right. Can you exhibit the sound a polar bear would make?
That's exactly what a polar bear sound would make. Now, what about a gorilla? I don't know. I mean, I'm kind of thinking the melody pitches and tone modulation within the
We're not
polar
making
bear.
music here.
Well, yeah, the music just kind of gives it that,
We're not
the
making
demonic
music.
feeling within it.
A demonic? Are we talking like battles in a rap battle or in a fight as in a fight?
Well, you've seen Star Wars, yeah?
No.
You've never seen...
I'm sorry. Let's not get into this. People get angry.
Okay. You have another question.
Yeah, okay. So you said that, gorillas only eat bananas and fruit. Are you advocating that vegetarians are weak?
Actually, no, I'm not. What I'm advocating is that the gorillas not possess the cold, hard curiosity that of the polar bear, so that when you're looking at gorillas and you look at a polar bear, it's not going to have the same intensity that's just like, I will come and attack you with full force.
Okay. Let's take some questions.
Oh, yes.
All right. You, sir.
Alright, since we show polar bears going around hugging Prius owners in our commercials, how can our society be afraid of them?
They'd be afraid of them because you see them hugging Prius owners. You see the cuteness of them, but then they contradict themselves. They come at you with intense curiosity. It's the confusion that the gorilla doesn't see coming that would cause it to blindside him, to attack him with a sheer force.
I disagree. You, sir.
In light of historical documentaries such as King Kong, how can you deny the gorilla's superior battle capabilities?
Well, with the whole idea of King Kong, I've really never seen a gorilla that size, nor have I ever heard of a gorilla that size. I mean, I don't know what Africa's feeding their gorillas, but, you know.
I have a question, actually. Okay, so just because you haven't seen a gorilla of that size, does that mean they don't exist?
No, but even
like, have you
as
ever seen Sasquatch? The Loch Ness
Actually,
Monster?
The Loch Ness Monster?
Yes.
No, but saying that, as you have,
right.
then how can you not have the intense curiosity and the rage that's built in with the roar of the polar bear, since you said that you've never heard the roar?
Because I can imagine it, and I imagine it to be quite weak. But King Kong is exhibited in movies and films, and we've all seen this, so we can imagine a gorilla of that size to be quite ferocious and beat a polar bear.
But when you really think about it,
yeah.
the gorilla King Kong, if you want to use an example, King Kong fell to a woman.
So he has a heart.
He has a heart that the polar bear does not possess. The pure
so wouldn't that make
curiosity.
it better in a fight? Because if a gorilla had to fight for its family, right, against a polar bear, then it could draw from its family inspiration and love, and fight even more because it has a heart. Whereas a polar bear, as you admitted, is without a heart.
Exactly.
Right.
But then if you want to go off with that, you can also say that a gorilla can possess, since it hasn't possessed the heart, it second guesses himself. And when the gorilla would second guess himself, it can open for attack.
All right. More questions? You can choose.
Yes.
This is for the app. You mentioned that gorillas make a very large sound. Do you understand that gorillas make that sound to avoid fights and to scare off anything that might attack it? What if it doesn't work?
Okay, they do that because they're scared of themselves. They have all this potential in them, and they know that if they were going to get in a fight with a polar bear, it would rip them to shreds. And it doesn't want to be violent because it has that heart, and it doesn't want to be a bad person, so it does that and makes that sound, which is ferocious regardless.
Wouldn't you agree that polar bears and gorillas have equal knowledge of different terrains?
No, I wouldn't, because a polar bear is commonly seen in places, like Antarctica, which are very icy, and they have glaciers, which do, turn into mountains, but they don't have those trees. And trees and vines and things and that sort of vegetation offer up a lot of obstacles that gorillas have an advantage in over.
So basically you're saying is, what happens if we take both of these animals, a gorilla and a polar bear, and put them in, say, the desert? How would they both have the advantage then? Who would have the most advantage?
I would say the gorilla, because the gorilla has to go, you have things like cacti, and you have pits that are formed, with quicksand or whatever, and whereas the polar bear has no clue what the heck sand is, or even what a cacti is, because it's off in Antarctica.
Well,
yes.
saying that, with the fact that it is in Antarctica is very prone and knowledgeable of what it has a flat terrain, being able to scope out a flat terrain and find places to hide. And also, if you really want to think about it, Antarctica is known for having a lack of visibility. And because the polar bear can actually go through the lack of visibility, and you put him in a desert with the sandstorms and stuff, it actually has a little bit more of an advantage than that of the gorilla because it can actually go through without this lack of visibility.
Because of visibility.
Yeah.
Okay, can you tell me what a gorilla's vision is compared to the polar bear's?
Actually, I cannot, but I can tell you for a fact that when a polar bear is in Antarctica, since there is a lack of visibility, since there, it's bogs up and
right.
the icy snow and all that stuff,
Yeah.
it's used to those sort of things, those other environments.
In the back.
Alright, so obviously polar bears are much more physically strong because they spend all their time in isolation, training, brutally murdering cute animals, whereas gorillas are just laying around, eating bananas and stuff and playing with their friends. Obviously, you can tell that a gorilla wouldn't be physically prepared to match up to a polar bear.
But why does the polar bear practice? Why does it train? It's because it's scared if it ever gets in a fight, it's not going to be able to win it. The gorilla doesn't practice because it already knows its potential. And it knows that in a fight against a polar bear, it would, quite frankly, win. Alright. On that note, let's go with an app speech. Alright, so essentially we've discussed quite a lot of things. We've discussed roars, we've roared, which is new, even for Spar. And basically what it comes down to is the knowledge, because we can't really go in terms of decibels for, which roar is stronger than another because it's all objective. And I don't know how good Jeff is at imitating a polar bear, but I'm not very good at imitating a gorilla, and I don't really want to be. But the fact of the matter is that a gorilla ultimately has more knowledge. Now, we talked about terrain and how Antarctica has visibility issues, but what we didn't talk about, and what wasn't really addressed, is that a gorilla has more knowledge of animals and people as well. You see, polar bears are in Antarctica, which is one of the most isolated place on the planet. They come into contact with sea-like animals, such as seals and penguins, and oftentimes only seals and penguins. Whereas gorillas are in jungles placed all over the world. Think of the rainforest or any other jungle. Even think of zoos, where they're put into contact with humans who they traverse through the jungles on a safari or whatnot. And they also come in contact with a variety of animals. So many animals, in fact, that if I were to list them, I would take up all of my time, and it would be very, 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 very boring, assuming that this isn't boring for you right now, which I really hope it isn't. Anyways, moving on. When we look at this in simple terms, a gorilla versus a polar bear, a gorilla is more formidable because, as this young man said, we have movies like King Kong to illustrate the gorilla, formidability. If King Kong hadn't been created, King Kong was created because of a purpose, and that is because people, humans, observed the gorilla's ferocity. People observed that gorillas were a strength, a force to be reckoned with. You don't see movies about King Polar Bear because they're not formidable. You don't have a fear when you look at a polar bear. Oftentimes, like baby polar bears, you're like, wow, how cute. And you don't see them fighting because that's not their nature. When it gets down to it, ladies and gentlemen, if a gorilla were to be put against a polar bear, they would win because of their knowledge, not only of the terrain, not only of their own powers, but because of their heart, which they have, which they're able to draw from their family, and also their ability to, engage themselves in anything from humans to terrain. So essentially, as I've said many, many times before, and hope you agree with now, in a fight, a gorilla would beat a polar bear. Thank you.
Okay. I think we can all agree, when you're looking at a polar bear, it does actually perceive to be more cute than that of a gorilla. However, when you're looking at a kitten, you can see the cuteness within the kitten. But the thing is, when the kitten starts begging for you, when it starts clawing at you, just meowing and purring like it would, it has an ulterior motive. The thing is, since the polar bear does have this cuteness factor that's put upon it, it actually gives it an advantage over the gorilla, because the gorilla is not going to look at it as much of a threat. But then when the polar bear, which I said is so cold-hearted and just heartless, doesn't have any sort of the mental capacity to love, as King Kong has been brought up, or King Kong fell because of a woman. It doesn't have this, and actually possesses this furious rage that it would come and attack it and blindside it. It'd almost be like a sucker punch to the gorilla, but the sucker punch would be a fatal one. Also, as we started talking about, talking about terrain, whereas gorillas, yes, they do take over the jungle. They have the trees, they have all these different obstacles and vines, as my opponent has stated. But the thing is, when a gorilla is going to be put into an environment, the flat terrain, or something has low visibility, such as the desert, which was brought up in cross-sex, the polar bear would clearly win because the polar bear is used to having this lack of visibility, the fog and the snow and the upbringing that's all within the Antarctic areas. And also, when you're thinking about, since the polar bear does not actually have the encounter of very many animals, it's learned to adapt. It can take out anything on land and sea, which I don't really think that the gorilla can say much for that. It can swim, it can go inside, it can swim, so it gives it another advantage right there. So if a gorilla or a polar bear are having a fight in the desert and an oasis pops up, the polar bear would have an advantage within this oasis because the gorilla cannot fight within it. So it's for the reasons that the cold-heartedness of the polar bear and the second nature of the ulterior motive from the polar bear's cuteness and the sheer curiosity and the knowledge within those terrains that the polar bear would clearly win in a fight against a gorilla.